Good Monday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for June the 19th. Today we are reading together in Joshua chapter 15 and Joshua chapter 16, which is going to speak about Judah's inheritance and then part of Joseph's inheritance. Remember, Joseph has two tribes representing him, Ephraim and Manasseh. We're going to see Ephraim's inheritance discussed in chapter 16. So let me get the text up on the screen for us today. If you'll forgive me, I'm going to be looking off to the side as I read because, well, my laptop had a bit of an accident. So it's going to be going off to the laptop doctor later on here in a bit. So I'm going to have to look over here at my secondary monitor to be able to actually read what's going on. I might be doing these then from the office at the building. I'm going to see maybe if I can do this from my iPad. I don't know if that's possible or not, but we're going to see what needs to be done, and we're going to get it done regardless. It might look a little funny for the next few days until I get my laptop back, but we will persevere and we will make it happen. So thanks again so much for reading along with me today on this Monday. Let me check this real fast. Let's see here. All right, I think we're good to go. Joshua chapter 15, verse number 1, talking again about Judah's inheritance. What we have here within this section of 13 through 21 is the inheritance portion of the text, just detailing who is getting what and where. It's going to be a lot of locations and things of that nature. So a little bit of a tedious read, but this is good because it does detail for us the faithfulness of God, and that's really the main takeaway I want us to get from reading these texts together is that these are the fulfillment of God's promises. It's showing God's faithfulness. Let's read here in Joshua chapter 15, in verse number 1. Joshua 15, verse number 1. Now the allotment for the tribe of the descendants of Judah by their clans was the southernmost region, south of the wilderness of Zin, and over to the border of Edom. Their southern border began at the tip of the Dead Sea on the South Bay, and went south of the Scorpion's ascent, proceeded to Zin, ascended to the south of Kadesh Barnea, past Hezron, ascended to Adar, and turned to Karka. It proceeded to Osmon and to the brook of Egypt. And so the border ended at the Mediterranean Sea. This is your southern border. Now the eastern border was along the Dead Sea to the mouth of the Jordan. The border of the north side was from the Bay of the Sea at the mouth of the Jordan. It ascended to Beth Hogla, proceeded north to Beth Araba, and ascended to the stone of Bahan ascended to the stone of Bahan, son of Reuben. Then the border ascended to Debir from the valley of Achor, turning north to Gilgal, that is opposite the ascent of Adumim, which is south of the ravine. The border proceeded to the waters of Ishmesh, there we go, and ended at En Rogel. From there, the border ascended to the Ben Hinnom Valley, to the southern Jebusite slope, that is Jerusalem, and ascended to the top of the hill that faces Hinnom Valley on the west, at the northern end of the Rephaim Valley. From the top of the hill, the border curved to the spring of the waters of Nephtoah, went to the cities of Mount Ephraim, and then curved to Baalah, that is Kirjath Jearim. The border turned westward from Baalah to Mount Seir, went to the north slope of the Mount Jearim, that is Chesalon, descended to Beth Shemesh, and proceeded to Timnah. Then the border reached to the slope north of Ekron, curved to Shikkeron, proceeded to Mount Baalah, went to Jabneel, and ended at the Mediterranean Sea. Now the western border was the coastline of the Mediterranean Sea. This is the boundary of the descendants of Judah around their clans. And I'll pull up a picture of this once we get done. Verse 13 of Joshua 15, he gave Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the following portion among the descendants of Judah, based on Yahweh's instruction to Joshua. Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron. Arba was the father of Anak. Caleb drove out from there the three sons of Anak, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai, descendants of Anak. From there he marched against the inhabitants of Debir, which used to be called Kiriath Sephir. And Caleb said, whoever attacks and captures Kiriath Sephir, I will give my daughter Aksha to him as a wife. So Othniel, son of Caleb's brother, Kenaz, captured it, and Caleb gave his daughter Aksha to him as a wife. When she arrived, she persuaded Othniel to ask her father for a field. As she got off the donkey, Caleb asked her, what can I do for you? She replied, give me a blessing. Since you have given me land in the Negev, give me the spring also. So he gave her the upper and lower springs. This is the inheritance of the tribes of the descendants of Judah by their clans. Verse 21, these were the outermost cities of the tribe of the descendants of Judah toward the border of Edom in the Negev: Kabzeel, Eder, Jagur, Kina, Dimona, Adadah, Kedesh, Hazor, Ethnan, Ziph, Telem, Bealoth, Hazor, Hadatah, Kerioth Hezron, that is Hazor, Amam, Shema, Moladah, Hazar Gada, Heshmon, Beth Pelet, Hazar Shual, Be'er Sheba, Biziothia, Baala, Im, Ezim, El Tolad, Chezel, Horma, Ziglag, Mana, Sansana, Lebeoth, Shelhim, Ain, Rimmon, 29 cities in all, with their settlements. In the Judean foothills, Eshtaol, Zorah, Ashna, Zanoah, in Ganim, Tapua, Inam, Jarmuth, Adullam, Soko, Azekah, Sha'araim, Edithaim, Gedera, and Gederathaim, 14 cities with their settlements. Zenon, Hadasha, Migdal Gad, Dilam, Mizpah, Jok Theel, Lachish, Bozkah, Eglon, Kabon, Lamam, Chitlish, Gederoth, Beth Dagon, Naamah, Makkedah, 16 cities with their settlements. Libnah, Ether, Ashan, Iftah, Ashna, Nezib, Keilah, Achzib, and Marashah, 9 cities with their settlements. Ekron with its surrounding villages and settlements. From Ekron to the sea, all the cities near Ashdod with their settlements. Ashdod with its surrounding villages and settlements. Gaza with its surrounding villages and settlements to the brook of Egypt and the coastline of the Mediterranean Sea. In the hill country, Shamir, Jatir, Soko, Dana, Kiriath Sana, that is Debir, Anab, Eshtemoh, Anim, Goshen, Halon, Gilo, 11 cities with their settlements. Arab, Duma, Eshan, Jainim, Beth Tapua, Athakah, Humta, Kiriath Arba, that is Hezron, and that is Hebron and Zior, 9 cities with their settlements. Meon, Carmel, Ziph, Judah, Jezreel, Jokdeam, Zanoah, Cain, Gebiah, and Timnah, 10 cities with their settlements. Hahul, Beth Zur, Gader, Ma'arath, Beth Anoth, and El Tekon, 6 cities with their settlements. Kiriath Baal, that is Kiriath Jaim, and Rabbah, 2 cities with their settlements. In the wilderness, Beth Arabah, Medin, Sekakah, Nibshan, the city of salt, and in Gedai, 6 cities with their settlements. But the descendants of Judah could not drive out the Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem. So the Jebusites still live in Jerusalem among the descendants of Judah today. Chapter 16 here of Joshua. The allotment for the descendants of Joseph went from the Jordan at Jericho to the waters of Jericho on the east, through the wilderness, ascending from Jericho to the hill country of Bethel. From Bethel, it went to Luz and proceeded to the border of the Archites by Adaroth. It then descended westward to the border of the Japhletites as far as the border of lower Beth Horon, then to Gazer, and ended at the Mediterranean Sea. So Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph, received their inheritance. This was the territory of the descendants of Ephraim by their clans. The border of their inheritance went from Ataroth Adar on the east to upper Beth Horon. In the north, the border went westward from Mech Methoth. It turned eastward from Taanath Shiloh and passed it east of Janoah. From Janoah, it descended to Ataroth and Naarah, then reached Jericho and went to the Jordan. From Tapua, the border went westward along the brook of Kanah and ended at the Mediterranean Sea. This was the inheritance of the tribe of the descendants of Ephraim by their clans, together with the city set apart for the descendants of Ephraim within the inheritance of the descendants of Manasseh, all these cities and their settlements. However, they did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gazer, so the Canaanites still live in Ephraim today, but they are forced laborers. And that concludes our read through Joshua 15 and Joshua 16. And I'll be honest, I'm happy to be done reading all of these very strange names of these cities. Very happy to be done with that. Nonetheless, let's consider for a minute again, remind ourselves of really the reason why this will be listed within these Holy Scriptures. We're sitting here thinking, man, they must have had extra parchment or something that they just need to write something on. You know, I don't believe with how easily I say that relatively, but how easily we switch properties and stuff. We buy one property and sell a property, sell that property, buy another one. We just switch properties so often, but that just isn't the case for the Israelites. This land really meant something to them because this was the fulfillment of God's promises to their father Abraham. So we should respect that, and we should recognize the seriousness of this text, that it is not just a text to take up space or to make sure that something's noted. No, it had a very serious meaning, and it was the meaning of God's fulfillment to the people. Now, with that said, I want to note just a few specific things. To begin with, verses 13 through 19 of chapter 15, which talks about Caleb and him basically following up from what we saw in chapter 14 of verses 6 through 15, where we see his strong faith. Remember, he went to Joshua. He said, you remember how I was faithful to Yahweh, how I gave an honest report, and how I was promised these things. Well, please let God be faithful to his promises and let me have this land. I know that the Anakim are there. I know there are large fortified cities that are there. But with God's strength and grace, I can overcome them, and we can conquer them and drive out the people. So that's basically what we have here. We have him following through with what he said previously, chapter 14. We see Caleb, verse 14, drove out from the three sons of Anak, Shashai, Ahiman, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak. He drove them out. And that's exactly what he said he would do. Well, then we see kind of a detail that tells us this was a really, really substantial task that they were taking on. These people were not going to be a pushover. And that seems to be indicated by what we see in verse 16, that whoever attacks and captures Kiriath Sephir, I will give my daughter Aksah to him as a wife. So this seems to be an enormous task. This seems to be a very serious task that was worthy of a very substantial reward, a very substantial prize. And that would be giving away his daughter in marriage to this great warrior who would be able to conquer this particular place. Remember, the Anak were revered as being giant, strong men, and to face them was nothing to wink at. Remember, it was the Anak, the Anakim. Those are the very people that the spies said, well, those are the people that fill up the land of Canaan. There's no way we can defeat them. Caleb says, no, we can with God's help, and whoever trusts in God and defeats them, I will give my daughter to him. And that's what we see in verses 13 through 19. Now, I want to note two instances of failure where the people did not follow through and do exactly as Yahweh said. We see that in verse 63 of chapter 15. The descendants of Judah could not drive out the Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem. So the Jebusites still live in Jerusalem among the descendants of Judah today. So that tells us then that the time frame of this writing seems to be prior to when Jerusalem was conquered. At least if I'm reading that the correct way, that seems to be the idea, that Jerusalem, when this is written, was not conquered yet, that the Judahites did not fulfill the command of God to completely drive out the people, and they still live in Jerusalem at that point. Same thing is true for the Ephraimites. In verse number 10 of chapter 16, they did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer. So the Canaanites still live in Ephraim today, but they are forced labor. So they did not drive them out completely. They made them slaves. But again, that doesn't seem to comport with what Yahweh actually said for them to do. They were supposed to completely eradicate them and send them out of the land to completely dispossess them. And really what we have here then in these verses, and this is not the first time we see this, again, going back to chapter 13, and verse number 13, we read there that the Israelites did not drive out the Geshurites or the Maacathites. So Gesher and Maacath still live in Israel today. Again, there's a failure to do what God said. It's not because God was not strong enough to accomplish it. It seems to be there would have been some failure on the part of the people. Maybe they did not care enough to push them out. Or maybe they thought, instead of just kicking them out, we'll make them our slaves. I'll make life easier on us. But really what we're seeing here are seeds being planted in Joshua. While we would say the vast majority of Joshua is a story of positive results for Israel, the reality is that Judges is coming. And in Judges, the failures that are sprinkled within Joshua really come back to bite Israel in the rear end. That really sets up the story of Judges to be as difficult as it is, because we don't see them fully following through on the commands that God did. So we have the two contrasting sides here. We have Caleb, who fully trusts in the Lord. I just appreciate so much what he emphasizes whenever he speaks about Yahweh's promises and how he fully trusts in Yahweh to help him to take the victory in this place. Whereas these other people, the rest of the Judahites and the Ephraimites, they don't trust in the Lord. They don't kick everybody out. And that's only, again, setting the scene and setting the table for futures or for troubles to come in the future. So the lesson for us is very simple. Trust in Yahweh's promises. His promises are seen here within this text in the fact that they possess this land. And actually, I said that I would bring up a map here. Let me pull that up very quickly here just so we can look at the two territories that we considered today. Let's see, where's this map at? I think it's back a couple pages. So we're going to go back here. Here we go. All right, let's see. All right, there we go. So today we talked about the Judahites. So we see their territory here. Remember, Simeon's the donut hole in Judah. Judah has a large space down here, but then we also see Ephraim, and they're right here as well. So we see all of the descriptions that we have here within chapter 15 with Judah. Their descriptions would describe this area, whereas the Ephraimites, their area would be described here as the way it's detailed for us in the text. Now remember, within here, we see that Jerusalem, which is right here, is that right? Right here, I believe it is. Jerusalem right there on the border of Judah and Benjamin. They are not driven out, so they're allowed to live there. And also we see the Canaanites that were in Gezer. So that would be this area. Come on, needs to be on here. It needs to be on here. Right there on the border. They were not driven out as well. So they became servants, forced laborers within this place. So again, we're seeing the details so far of everything being settled. We'll go back here and look at Reuben. Reuben's inheritance is mentioned here. Gad's inheritance mentioned there. And then East Manasseh is mentioned there. Then we've seen Judah right here and Ephraim right here. And then our read for tomorrow, we're going to see West Manasseh, this portion detailed. Then we're also going to see some additional territory that was given to Joshua's descendants. And then we're going to see the distribution of land at Shiloh. We're going to see Benjamin discussed. And I believe that's going to be it for our read in 17 and 18 tomorrow. So again, hopefully this read and this picture combined help us to have a good visualization for what it looked like as the people were settling the promised land. Again, this is a sign of Yahweh's faithfulness They needed to respond well to that faithfulness by being faithful themselves, driving the people out completely. Unfortunately, though, again, we're beginning to see chinks in the armor of where they're not doing that. And again, that's going to eventually lead us to Judges, where we have all sorts of issues, unfortunately, within the land. If you have any questions or comments about the text here in Joshua 15 or 16, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below, and we'll do our best to have a good discussion there. I appreciate so much you tuning in for this read on this Monday. Hope that you will be back again tomorrow as we read together from Joshua chapter 17 and Joshua chapter 18. Take care, and God bless.